Musical Talk, the UK's independent musical theatre podcast. And today we start with a song from Lysistrata, the disco vaudeville rock and roll musical.
Alone on the street, nobody around. I told my friends to meet me here, not a sound. A bacchanal, a sapphic rite. Oh, Orpheus will get 'em out real fast. But like this war that goes on forever, our people dying, it can't last. Gotta think of heaven before I go, 'cause right now it ain't here. What we gotta do to make a change? What we gotta do to make a change? I need all your help to gain some control. My destiny is to stop this war, so grab a hold. Get off the wheel of violence. You don't have to feel the pain. And once you're able to understand this, the heavens' joy upon you will rain. Gotta think of heaven before I go, 'cause right now it ain't here. What we gotta do to make a change? What we gotta do to make a change? What we gotta do to make a change?
Hello and welcome to Musical Talk. I'm Thos, the man who needs no introduction, but you're getting one anyway. Well, we continue with our saga, it's lasted that long, and I think therefore saga is the right word, of episodes comprising my interviews with the various people behind the various musicals I enjoyed at this year's Edinburgh Fringe. And if you've stuck with me this far over the last few weeks as we continue our odyssey, you'll know that I've been arbitrarily grouping shows together under a theme or an umbrella. And so today's episode is subheaded The Female of the Species. And as you'll gather from that, I hope, all the shows today feature women in positions of power or attaining power. Sometimes for good, sometimes for ill. Some of the people today will be emancipating themselves, empowering themselves. Some will be doing that through dubious means. One will be a murderer, some are outright villainesses, and one will be a figurative figure of death. And I hope that's whetted your appetite. Now, at the beginning of the programme, you heard a song from the fantastically named Lysistrata, the disco vaudeville rock and roll musical, by Sal Trapani. And this was the very first show I saw in Edinburgh this year. You may or may not know Lysistrata. It's a classical story by Aristophanes, a comedy, and it's been updated by Sal Trapani, with whom you'll hear an interview in just a minute. But do you know the story? Well, in brief, Lysistrata tells the story of a time in ancient Greece when all the men in the state had been away at war for such a long time, the women rebelled. And not only that, they prevailed. How did they bring their state to peace and their men back to home? Well, the answer is by withdrawing all sexual privileges, forcing all the men to their knees, although as there were very few other outlets, one can only imagine with each other. Anyway, it's a famous classical story, and whilst of course it has an important moral about women empowering themselves and not being overlooked in a fair society, it's also a comedy. And this version was a musical comedy with lots of different musical styles. To prove my point, you're about to hear an interview with the creator, Sal Trapani, but before that, let's hear one more song from the score of this wonderful musical. Musical Talk.
Our
My name is Sal Trapani. I reside in New York City. I teach at Western Connecticut State University, and we're here at the Edinburgh Fringe to perform Lysistrata, the disco vaudeville rock and roll musical, which I adapted from Aristophanes and composed the music and lyrics and directed it.
Now, that's quite a big do, if I may say. So that's directing, producing and writing. But of course, let's start immediately with the title and the subtitle. I think it's the subtitle that's going to draw people in, because it's vaudeville and rock and roll and disco. And all three were represented. So how did you come up with that particular ragbag, if I may say?
Well, it's funny, but when I had auditions for the show, I had asked the performers to prepare auditions based on what they made of the various aspects of the show. And so they came up with all of these incredible ideas. And of course, I had some ideas, of course. And then I put them all together. And as far as the music goes, I just began writing it over the holiday break. And it just kind of wrote itself.
So you have a natural fluency when writing music in different styles?
Yes.
So there's probably more rock than disco and probably more disco than vaudeville. Would that say that represents your particular tastes in music yourself?
I would say so. I mean, the vaudeville stuff I think is represented more by the old men's and old women's choruses.
And the tap dancing.
Yes,
it's a fantastic dance-off, is there not?
Yes. So, there's a lot... there's a lot in the vaudeville, but probably more rock and roll. You're right. Yeah, and I think that's my sense. My sensibility is probably a little bit more rock and roll.
I have to say I'm a great fan of vaudeville and I'm a great fan of disco as well. So I really enjoyed the disco piece, and I thought it's the sort of the haunting end of disco rather than the high energy. So,
right.
Which I thought allowed lyrics to sort of come across.
Right.
How, when writing songs, do you find music easier or lyrics, or do you do it as one? Or are you a fusion man?
Well, I find that the music is easier if I have the lyrics. And I usually get ideas, and I can get ideas anytime. And of course, with technology now, I'll be driving down the road, and something will pop into my head, and I just get out my iPhone, and there's a little button there that can record memos and just start singing into it, and then I had quite a few of these little snippets and ideas, and some of them come back up into the songs, and the lyrics are kind of from Aristophanes' ideas, which I then kind of transformed based on what I thought he was trying to get across in that particular section of the play, and then wrote original stuff for that.
So you've not grafted them on; you have actually development from the development of the plot. So
Exactly.
That's as it should be.
Exactly.
Yes,
sure.
Now, I have to say, you directed it as well, didn't you?
Yes, I did.
There's lots of splendid comedy touches. I have to say, my all-time favourite moment of the whole piece, actually, is the unexpected... you have three pig puppets who play senators in Athens.
Yes.
And there's one section when they leave, and they all shout, "Wee, wee, wee," which I took to be a reference to, and they all said "wee" as they went home, as in Five Little Pigs. And this little pig went "wee, wee, wee" all the way home.
Right. And
that's how I took it anyway.
Exactly. And one of the things about vaudeville is that in vaudeville there's a lot of improvisation, and a lot of what we were able to do was improvise, and I allow my performers to improvise.
Yes, there was great senses all the way through, I thought, of when set pieces were occurring. You'd allowed your actors who were not directly involved to actually act almost as a Greek chorus, ironically, which was to comment upon the proceedings.
Yes.
And there was also a great deal of synchronized speaking as well, which I took to be a play on the Greek chorus role.
Exactly. You got it. It's really nice when somebody gets it and you got it. And so it's that combination of the synchronized speaking, the rhythmic speaking, and the rhythmic dancing of the Greek chorus, but also the ability to improvise in a vaudeville style and to play that kind of comedy. And I think Aristophanes would appreciate it.
Well, bearing in mind it's about the battle of the sexes, and as you say, based on the Aristophanes story, there's also, to a modern eye, there's also the transgender issues of all your Spartan and Athenian soldiers are wearing skirts, of course.
Right.
Whereas one of the female protagonists, certainly of the old ladies, is in fact wearing a trouser suit.
Right.
So you've also got that play going on as well.
Yes, and that was something that we wanted right from the beginning. We knew we wanted the men with these kind of skirts, which as you say are kind of transgender, but also could be deemed a kind of battle garment. So
certainly, I mean, they are. Well, they're not authentic ones, are they? But they're
Right.
certainly in the style of what
Yes,
would have been worn.
yes,
Absolutely.
yes. So
trousers
we-
so much less common in those
Yes,
days.
yes. So we thought that worked very well as well. And Lisa, our costume designer, was very, very. I think she understood what I was going for with a blend of classical and modern, which I think is very, very hard to get. Stylistically, in the costumes, in all of the set pieces, and the set which Elizabeth Popeil, who is my design partner, came up with, and then the lighting, which was very modern, and of course
Yes.
the Gilded Balloon has a wonderful lighting rig.
Well, you got the real disco sense out of that,
Yes,
if I may say.
yeah,
Yes,
yeah.
But particularly at the end, there were plenty of rotating and flashing lights.
Exactly, and that's Scott Calley, and so these are all professionals working, with our group. So I appreciate their input and their creativity. And when we did the show originally, we did have some visual effects. We did have some film and some slides and things like that, and a lot of images back up on the screen. But we decided that we didn't need them for this production. That the production can speak on its own.
Well, yes, it's all in the strength of the character interplay, anyway, isn't it? So
Yes,
sets are lovely,
yes.
but they are they're not essential to develop the context, which is
It's about the characters. It's about the performers, and the one thing is that there is a serious side to war, and
I believe it has been observed.
Yeah, and sometimes I feel myself, and I'm curious from an audience point of view whether or not that comes across strongly enough. The seriousness of what's going on in the world today. And as I watch the show, I get more and more ideas about how I could make the impact even greater on a contemporary audience.
That's your director's eye speaking.
Yes, yes,
Yeah,
that it never ends. I mean, they'll get notes. They get notes. The performers get notes after every performance because we're always working on making it better, and we want this show to have a life, even after the Fringe.
Which brings us on to websites and other ways of contacting you. Because although you finish in Edinburgh at the time of recording on the next day, which is tomorrow, there are ways of anyone who wasn't able to see it, foolish people, of getting some sense of it. Is there not?
Yeah, our website is www.wcsu.edu/theater arts. That's the university website. My email is saltrap@gmail.com, and anyone can contact me for CDs or for seeing video clips, and we'll put some more stuff on YouTube. One of the things I'd like to mention is that there's an amazing play at the Traverse Theater called The Events, and it's a play about a tragedy that happened to a choir in Norway. And it's a David Gregg play. It's a brand new play. It's been getting a lot of press. And in every performance, there is a choir. And we have been asked to play the choir in the show. And we did it this past week, and we'll be doing it again tomorrow. The show's completely sold out. And we had about 2 rehearsals, for a couple of hours, and then you're thrust upon a stage at the Traverse Theater with a completely packed house, and you have to perform as the choir and sing these very, very intricately composed songs.
But what an amazing contrast between what you're doing here.
Totally different,
which has meaning, but is done in a very sort of tongue-in-cheek, cheerful, upbeat, robust way. With more than just a slice of a funny thing happened all the way to the forum in terms of tone. Plus that very serious piece about a disaster and choirs, and also a different style of singing. That's very flattering, is it not?
It's nice. It's very nice, and it's it's an amazing experience for the performers, and I actually performed in the choir, and that was interesting for me to get up on the stage with my performers, and we were very well received, and Traverse people are wonderful, and the whole company are a great group, the Actors Touring Company out of London who are producing it, and so this has just been a fantastic experience.
But bringing us back to Lysistrata,
yes.
Does it have a future? I mean, it's all about the past, but does it have a future?
It does, and we're already thinking about it, bringing it to New York, possibly the New York Fringe, or even sooner, because that's next summer. That's on right now. It coincides with Edinburgh, but we're thinking about bringing it in, and we'll see what happens with that. So yeah, we're excited about that.
A genuine international tour.
Exactly.
Very good.
Exactly.
Well, it's been lovely speaking to you, Sal. Thank you so much for sparing me a bit of time.
You're very welcome.
I wish it great success for the future.
Thank you.
And I have to say, thank you very much for a slyly comic, very entertaining piece.
Thank you very much.
Musical talk. Well, that was Sal Trapani and Lysistrata, and I'm very grateful to him for allowing me to play a couple of songs from that score. And remember, if you want to hear the whole score, you can acquire it from Sal. He's very happy for people to contact him about the show. Well, if that show was about women in ancient times empowering themselves, then how appropriate, I think, to move on to the next show we're going to be discussing today, A Body to Diet For, which is about women empowering themselves in the modern world. Absolutely slap bang contemporary modern Britain. The show's by Alan Whitaker and Tim Amphilogoth, and just to give you a feel of what it's about, because it's quite difficult to describe as you'll hear in this interview, here's the blurb from the advertisements. Greta is a normal teenager and would-be English teacher from Brentford. But when she runs away from her abusive stepfather, she begins a journey towards self-discovery through a crazy world where her body is the object of fascination to all, and where fat and thin, male and female, media and politics, appetite and self-image are at war. As she waxes and wanes, she is exploited by fashionistas, hounded by hacks, betrayed by friends and lovers, entrapped by body liberationists, manipulated by politicians, experimented on by big pharmaceutical companies, and bewitched by the Willendorf Venus. And it goes on to say, will Greta ever find normality and true love she yearns for? Will obese surrealist terrorists blow up her wedding? A darkly comic, ultimately uplifting fantasy about our obsession with body image. Well, I don't think I could have described it better myself, and I'm almost certain that no one else can. However, I had the pleasure of talking to two people closely connected with the show, so let's now hear from them as they talk about their involvement with A Body to Diet For. Musical talk.
I'm Chelsea Caulfield, and I play the character of Uta in the brand new musical comedy A Body to Diet For.
My name's Ben Holder, and I'm the musical director for A Body to Diet For.
Now, I think it would be fair to say that it's a absurdist comedy musical. Would you care, and I'd like to see how you're going to do this, to explain the plot, to a degree at least, without ruining the finale?
Go on, you try.
You may wish to do it together.
Okay, no, we'll do it together.
Yeah, okay, so it's about the story of a girl called Greta, and basically throughout the musical she goes through several transformations through body image. She becomes super thin and becomes a supermodel, and then she comes over 30 stone, like literally overnight she transforms into over 30 stone, and it's about her going through that and sort of what causes her to do those things along the way.
It sort of charts the, that's not the best way of explaining it, but it's sort of it through the story of this one girl who is a really normal girl who wants to be an English teacher, and then finds herself mixed up in all sorts of sort of crazy stuff. Her story is used as a vessel to explore these themes of society's relationship with dieting and with body image and weight issues, all that sort of thing. And it's also absolutely, but it's also mixed up in this sort of. In the sort of absurdist bit comes from all the there's the sort of magic references and the witchcraft and things. And there's this figure Faye, who's a sort of narrator, a sort of manipulator figure, who
is a female feminist.
Yeah, she's a and she's a she is, and she's a witch, and she has this statuette of the Willendorf Venus, which is the ancient sort of fertility statue that she uses. One is supposed to get the sense that she is sort of pulling the strings of what's happening to Greta's story.
She prods the story along,
She
turns
does.
up every now and then.
And I think the extent to which the extent to which Faye is responsible, and the extent to which all of the things to do with the Herr Kafka and the crazy scientists and things, which also feature, we just have to see the show to understand it. I think, it's all sort of it's very all very sort of referential.
There's a lot of literary stuff to pluck out of your
Absolutely. The working title for the show was The Kafka Diet. And Tim, who wrote the book for the show, is very sort of into Kafka. Uta's character is Uta Verwandlung, Verwandlung being German for metamorphosis. So it sort of all ties up.
My foreign language let me down there.
Well, Ben's very good at German. He taught me all my German.
It all kind of ties up. It is clever. It's very clever.
Yeah.
Funny enough, you remind me very much of Judith Thurs in your character. She's the woman she's the villain in Carry On Spying, actually, if you want to know.
Brilliant.
But there was a touch of that kind of sort of over the top in you. I thought it was rather splendid, if I may say. But there are other absurdist and surrealist elements. I mean, I really like the idea of an establishment group of people who are keeping people fat through surrealist terrorism. The Lardy-Dardarists. There's a lot in that. Immediate, just punning them. To enjoy.
There is, and also politically as well.
Yes.
There's quite a lot of politics sort of
underlining.
There's quite a lot to read into it if you would choose
to.
Yes.
But its essential tone is exuberant, isn't it? Really, I think so. So for you both have you're on stage as an actress and one of the significant characters.
Yep.
You're on stage as musical director and tied to your people.
Yeah.
So it's a big ask of both of you. How have you found the piece? When did you join the project, and what challenges has it offered you, really?
Well, I'm actually very new to the project. I auditioned for it in June, yeah.
It was recent as that?
Yeah. I auditioned for the part in June and was lucky enough to get the part. And we started rehearsals in July, which we rehearsed throughout, and then we came straight up to Edinburgh in August.
Because you are a professional acting and you're a professional group, so
yes, we are. We're
standard, isn't it, for a professional group? 2 or 3 weeks.
It's quite quick.
We're 10 individuals who most of us didn't know each other before we had involvement in this production, and we all brought together and worked together on the show. So I've only been involved with it for a very short period of time, but it's I think the involvement with the show has kind of been like the piece. It's really quick paced and it's brilliant, good fun, and it's just been a great enjoyment to be involved in it. So
I've been around it slightly longer because I workshopped it with Matthew Gould. He directed it. So Matthew and I have sort of seen it from the start. We did a workshop back in February, and we sort of did a little showcase. Well, Tim and Alan wrote it a couple of years ago, and and in its full version, it's nearly 3 hours long, and there's a lot more. There's a lot more a lot more time to sort of. To develop all the story and things. Absolutely, because that's the stage that it's at. But Matthew and I sort of workshop that sort of shorter version, and I've been working with Alan, who composed it. I sort of made the vocal score and did some vocal arrangements and sort of got all the music on its feet. But that's been a sort of longer process. So Matthew and I have been around it a long time, but I think I feel. Hopefully that we've developed really lovely relationships with the composers, and we're kind of hopefully going to be working with them on some of their newer material and things now. And
I've got to ask, are the composers also the book writers?
Alan wrote the music, and Tim wrote the book and the lyrics. So and the words. Exactly. All the words. He dealt with the words. And they're very funny. They're lovely chaps. They're quite different characters, they've been quite heavily involved in it, but in a really, really positive way. They got on so well with the cast, and they got on really well with Matthew and I, and it's been a real pleasure.
And I think that's really nice as a cast member as well. So often when you work on new things, you sort of get handed a script and you don't know what the thought process behind it was or the reason for it being written.
It's a fait accompli by the time you get to it.
Yeah, but it's so lovely. Both Tim and Alan, they've met us after rehearsal. They've come along and watched rehearsals and, given us as actors, pieces of information that maybe they want us to try and focus on more. But then also, on the social side, we've then been able to go out and have a drink with them and really nitpick at their brains to find out why they've written these characters and what their thought process was behind the entire piece.
Because you just can't do that with Shakespeare and Coriolanus.
No, you can't.
No, not quite. No, I think plenty have tried. But I think also it's exciting for them, I hope, because they're both. Alan is a very sort of experienced musician, and Tim is an experienced writer, but they've never written a musical before.
Have they not?
So I think that's that will have hopefully been a really interesting thing for them.
So their dynamic is a fresh one as
Absolutely.
well, at least in this context.
Yeah.
I've got to ask, forgive me, you've seen it in several of its iterations.
Yeah.
So how has it changed?
That's an interesting question. I think in the very, very full version of the show, I think one gets the sense that there probably is 3 hours worth of story. So I think one of the challenges when getting into absolutely, I think so. Yeah, absolutely. Well, heading that way anyway.
Way,
yes, absolutely. Yeah. I think I think you notice. I think we've noticed the challenge of shortening everything. I think what's happened. A lot of the songs are a lot shorter, and the story is slightly simplified. I think what we found during the workshop process was was a way to retain as much of the story as we could, whilst not having any anything superfluous, because there's just not time. There's not time in when it has to be so quick.
Well, bearing in mind so much of it's about body image. I mean, I fear to say it, but you were cutting the flab a little bit in order to get into Edinburgh.
Well, I think you do, and that's sure, and just keep the keeping it sort of as coherent as possible, whilst.
Well, it
not,
does. I mean, it helps that it's slightly larger than life in terms of performance and what it's saying as well. So it's not filigree, I don't think, if you don't mind me saying. It's not an intricately plotted piece.
No.
As long as you're keeping with the thrust of it all and
Yeah.
enjoying yourself.
Yeah.
From a point of view of the audience I was just in this evening, they appear to be enjoying themselves a lot, and there were good responses. But what have you been getting? I mean, forgive me. You've been here for a few weeks, haven't you?
Yeah, we have. I think we've had a real mixture. I think some people come and they absolutely love the piece, and others just aren't as keen. But I think no matter what the piece is, no matter what show, you could go to watch something on the West End or Broadway, and there are always going to be people who don't like what they see, and there are always going to be people who absolutely love what they see.
I went to the cinema recently, and somebody walked out after 20 minutes, and it was a film that had been around for 3 months, and you think, must have realised by now what's going on.
Yeah.
Of course.
You're right. So you're absolutely right.
But
One
I
man's
think-
meat is another man's meat.
Yeah, I think it's a real mixture, but I think if people just come with an open mind and they realise that we're having, a really good time on stage, and they just relax and go along with our enjoyment, then they will enjoy it. Sorry, I think it's only if they.
Heckle, boo, and throw.
Yeah,
We're not quite. Yeah, it's not quite got to that.
no, it's not got to that stage.
I think you can judge. I mean, it's funny for me as the pianist, sort of sitting on the side of the stage. You can sort of read the audience a little bit, and I think
got license
you can
to look at it. You can break the fourth wall.
Oh, I can a bit. Yeah, no, I can. Just about. And that's quite interesting. And that's quite unique for me as well, because I suppose I'm not sitting in the pit, sort of on the stage, and I can sort of see what's going on. And I think it's very interesting to see. I think you can judge quite early on whether the audience is with you. I think the actors have to sort of grab the audience and then take them on the journey of the piece. And I think in general they're really managing to, and I think it's really impressive.
British audiences in particular, I think need sometimes to be given license to enjoy themselves, or license to laugh.
Yeah.
So if they've been given those clues and hints so early on and so quickly, then yes, they'll be with you. Otherwise, they're not quite certain of tone. It's interesting. We're very cautious about.
Yeah.
But I think there are parts of the piece where I think as an audience member, you would not be sure whether it was supposed to be funny or not.
Yeah.
But I actually think that I think it's probably planned that way, because I think it's supposed to be slightly uncomfortable but also slightly funny. I think there are those moments, and I think it's very interesting to read those moments in the audiences.
Well, let me tell you from my own point of view, the most uncomfortable moment in the whole piece, actually, funny enough, occurs rather early on, which is when is his name Reg, the chap who runs the shop?
Yes, the stepdad,
but not quite
inverted commas.
Right, yes. Who's sleeping with the mother, but is obviously making really very forward advances, and is likely really to have gone, should we say, politely too far. If it weren't for the fact then something else happens which distracts him, and it's actually, there is the suggestion that physical assault and possibly sexual assault are in the offing here, and you suddenly think, maybe this isn't quite what I think it is. But he's but then, fortunately, I mean, it moves on from him, and he gets his just desserts quite rightly later on.
Well, it moves, and that sort of sparks that incident also sort of sparks the start of Greta's journey.
A literal journey for Greta, because she leaves home, doesn't she? I mean, it is, so that's how it happens. I mean, and also, let's be honest, she gets played by 3 different actresses.
Yes.
And I think the audience took a second or two to realise. I mean, there's continuity in costume and colour scheme. We must notice these things. Pink and black works for a lot of people.
Absolutely,
But but once people have tweaked it, they got it, and then when it happened again, they got it. But have you had any surprises with that? Have you got the sense that sometimes the audience aren't getting that it's the same character in 3 different forms? Because you would lose them that way if they didn't get it.
I personally don't think anyone has. I think, I personally think that eventually, if there is any difficulty, I think eventually they do realise that it is the same person. But I don't think that is a very big problem. But then I don't know. Actually, I think it's quite hard for me to say because
right in the opening, there's the scene. There's the 3 of them are they were standing across the stage, and it is the 3. I think hopefully that sets it up well enough. I've got to be honest. It's not something I've thought about. I've worried about too much. I think there are some bits of the story which are a little confusing, because it's a little bit crazy and slightly absurdist, and that's the way it's supposed to be. But I think the journey of the Gretas and the 3 actresses playing Greta, I think that's okay. I think
there's a lovely moment of almost handover when the second iteration, who's the stick-thin one, who becomes a model. There's the previous sort of normal shape, should we say, Greta watching over her shoulder as she goes on that bit of a journey. So I think you can sort of see that's that's
and
such
she's
a
clutching the Willendorf Venus, and that's
How would you describe the music?
It's rock. Alan, the composer, is a rocker, and he's written a lot of his solo stuff, which has that sort of vibe.
It's very bouncy, you see.
Very bouncy.
I wouldn't have said that was a rock musical. I can see that it's rock influenced, or pop influenced, but I wouldn't have said that overtly.
What would you think?
That's the reason I asked you, really.
Okay.
Because actually, if it's rock, it's musical theatre rock.
Yeah, I
it's
think
not radio rock.
And I wonder what Alan what his take would be on that. I think partly the sound of the music in the context of our show is affected by the way we're playing it. I don't mean that in a really negative way. I just mean, so I'm playing the piano, and then my friend Emma is playing percussion. So we are the orchestra, and we've not got lots of guitars and things. That's to do with kind of space constraints and all sorts of things. But it's I've sort of quite enjoyed kind of reducing it onto the piano, and doing it as a piano-led thing.
And that gives it its own vibe as well, doesn't it?
I hope so.
Yeah, it works very well. Like it still has that brilliant, that brilliant vibe and that brilliant feeling that you need as a cast member. When you go on stage, you need to be able to instantly get that feel. And a word that Ben uses a lot is like a groove to the piece, and you instantly get that from the both of them.
I've got that from Emma, the percussionist. She always talks about groove, so I've started talking about groove. But it's like piano and percussion groove. So it's
and it's brilliant. Like as a cast member, you instantly get that, and it just rubs off on you, and then you're able to pass it on over to the audience.
So you do get that instant connection with the score as a performer.
Yes. Yeah.
Well, that's good.
Yeah.
I hope so. And they're good singers. They are good singers.
Well, it was done with, I could hear what was going on as well, which hasn't been true of every show I've seen in Edinburgh.
Okay.
So let's
lovely. Okay.
Yes, that was very good. My final question for the two of you then is, what next for the two of you? There we are. That was quite easy. That's a question.
Well, I'm going to be heading back to London, and I suppose as many people will be in this situation, I'll be going back to auditioning for new things and looking for more performing work.
So we should see you on the stage at some stage soon.
I'd like to say that, fingers crossed. Hopefully, I would love that if that happens. So yeah.
I'm doing some keyboard work. I'm playing keyboards for a little tour of Spelling Bee in the autumn, which is a lovely show, and that will be really good fun. And then I'm doing pantomime over Christmas.
Is that the company that had Spelling Bee up here last year who were sending it?
No, this is
different Spelling Bee.
Yeah, this is a little tour that's going out. It's Ash Productions and Stuart Hicks is taking it out on tour with Patch of Blue Theatre as well. I should say they're joint production. So that will be lovely.
That is then.
Oh, is it?
Patch of Blue did it last
Oh no,
year.
of course they were here, and I'm sorry. Yes, they did. It was them. But so Alex, who directed it, who runs Patch of Blue,
And who's doing title of show this
exactly.
year.
He's directed title show. Yes, yeah. I'm sorry. No, it is, and they have done their own little tour of it before. They've done it in a couple of different. They did it in Liverpool as well, and opened it around a little bit. But they're doing that. It is a new version of it, new cast and everything, and they're doing a little
They've
tour.
redirected it and everything.
Yeah, it's just for 8 weeks.
They're
So
a jolly good company though. We like that.
they're lovely. Yeah, they're lovely. They're so lovely, and I play for the little auditions for them and stuff.
And do you have websites at all? Are you on Twitter?
Yes, I am on Twitter, and I'm simply at Chelsea Caulfield.
Oh right, splendid.
Yeah, so it's just my name.
I'm Benjamin Holder on Twitter and benjaminholder.co.uk, and go and check us out, I suppose.
Yeah, I can be found on my agent's website, which is Gielgud Management. So.
Splendid. Well, let's hope people do find you well.
Yeah.
Thank you so much. Body to Life was great fun, very exuberant, very enjoyable. So thank you very much, and I hope you do well till the end.
Thank you very much.
Thank you, Thos. Thank you. It's been a pleasure.
You.
Musical talk. Well, there we are, a body to diet for, and it was lovely to speak to the two of them. And funnily enough, Ben and I had never met before, but there was an immediate connection, and we have this strange sense that we've known each other for years. It's very odd. And then, of course, in the way of things, we kept bumping into each other all over Edinburgh, because he was also involved musically with The Road to Qatar, an off-Broadway American musical, which you could have seen in Edinburgh this year, featuring a friend of Musical Talk, Josh Boyd Rochford. Well, the last two shows we've discussed have all been about women empowering themselves, but in different ways. And indeed, as you heard, one of the movers and shakers of the movement to overcome body fascism, if you like, in A Body to Diet For, was not above using the darker arts. In fact, she actually murders someone, or at least brings about someone's death in a knowing way. So not all squeaky clean. In fact, a bit of a villainess. And that's the link to our next show, which is, in full, John Rawls's A Theory of Justice, the musical, ! It's another one of those shows where the title itself sells it to you, and you want to go and see it just to find out what the hell it's on about. I'd certainly picked up noises about this musical before I got to Edinburgh, and indeed I was tweeting about it beforehand. You can follow me on @musicaltalkthos, should you be interested. And before I went in, I tweeted, I want to come out whistling the jurisprudence. Well, I did. It was a highly accomplished piece, and was essentially a comic romp through all the great political philosophies of history. Now, anyone who's got much of a grasp of history will know that most of those people were men. So what on earth is this musical doing in today's episode? Well, the answer is that, like A Body to Diet For, there was a significant female character who was essentially a villain. Or villainess, depending on whether you want to make it gender specific. Her name is Ayn Rand, a real character from history, and here's how she's described on the A Theory of Justice, the musical website. She is an objectivist Russian libertarian seductress, the chief villain and mistress of Nozick. Robert Nozick, if you like, is the more active male villain, and he's described on the website as a libertarian villain. Gosh, isn't it lucky that all these people are dead? Well, it describes itself as an all-singing, all-dancing romp through 2,500 years of political philosophy. And I was lucky enough to catch up with Ramin Sabi and Tommy Pito, two of the people behind the show, for an informative and thoughtful, how appropriate, chat. Musical talk.
We are doing John Rawls' A Theory of Justice, the musical. I am Ramin Sabi, the co-writer, producer and technical director.
My name's Tommy Pito. I'm another co-writer, and I'm also acting Karl Marx in the show.
And another writer that isn't here is Elon Aslan Levy.
And Toby Hewlin did our musical direction.
and the
and arrange
orchestration.
and orchestration.
Splendid. Now, the name of the musical you've just explained, it's quite lengthy, isn't it? Shall we have that again?
So that's John Rawls' A Theory of Justice, the musical.
Now, first question, which letter of the alphabet are you listed under in the
So we're under T, actually. In the Fringe guide, we're under T.
Yeah.
Some places we're under A.
Most places decided to drop the John Rawls
Yeah.
from the beginning of the title and just call it A Theory of Justice, the musical.
And he is, of course, speech marks, our hero. But come on, give me a quick breakdown of the plot.
So John Rawls, a young professor at Harvard
In the 70s.
in 1971, is trying to reinvigorate the field of political philosophy, looking for the next big idea in this supposedly dead field. And he sees a student he calls Fairness, who inspires him to write a theory of justice. But physicists in the next squad accidentally open a time vortex, which Fairness falls into. He goes in to save her, and so this starts an epic journey where he meets a whole range of political philosophers, from Plato and Socrates, who is a ventriloquist doll, a rap battle between Thomas Hobbes and John Locke, Rousseau, who gives a rock number, and all this he's pursued by the evil libertarian villains, Robert Nozick and Ayn Rand, who do a tango. We also have a utilitarian barbershop quartet.
And a cameo with a crazy Karl Marx, who's a homeless man, really.
Yes.
And then to top it off is Immanuel Kant as a fairy godmother.
Stroke drag queen.
Yeah, yeah.
With just a little bit too much relish, I
Yeah.
thought, provided by your actor.
Yeah.
So, yes, it's basically a gallop through time, isn't it? To meet some of the big names in philosophy, political philosophy in particular, and a few are throwaways, I noticed. I noticed that Thomas Aquinas and Montesquieu get sort of name checked but don't bother to turn up. And it's very funny, let's be honest. You could describe it in lots of different levels. It's a romantic comedy, if you know, the relationship between John Rawls and Fairness. It's also got an edge there because Fairness is one of the people in his class. So there's a bit of an edge going on. Of course, it's a chase if you're looking at that point, but of course, most of all, it's a comedy. Whilst at the same time being true to the philosophical beliefs of the people on the way who are met. So someone's going to say, and it's going to be me. How did this come to be? The inception of this. Which one of you is the philosopher with the dream?
Well, it started with Ramin. He just said it as a joke one day. I don't quite know why.
It was this is something we study. It's like the cortex. We're both from Oxford University. We went to study. And
What are we both reading, by the way?
So we both read politics, philosophy, and economics.
Oh, so it is within your sphere.
Yeah.
Yes.
So,
It's not like we're doing something really bizarre.
No,
I just had to stumble across it today. Yes.
So one thing you set to study was a theory of justice, which is this massive, very boring book. And wouldn't it be fun? Theory of Justice, the musical, lol.
And then the rest of us laughed, and then Elon Aslan-Levy, who's the one of the other writers, said, "That's a great idea. We have to do it." And then me and Ramin just turned to him and said, "No, Elon. It was a joke. We're not really doing this." But then about a year of nagging later,
we eventually started writing.
But sometimes ideas are so engaging from the very first that they even when they've been immediately shouted down, they lurk in the back of the mind and then come to full fruition. Shall we say. Yes, absolutely. So when was this then? Come on, when did you actually finally decide to engage with it as a project?
So I actually have a precise record of it, which is the 5th of August 2012.
Right.
When
Could you be more specific?
actually I
Just after lunchtime.
It was 12:32 because so this is when I had a recording because I kind of co-wrote a lot of the music. So this is when I first got the main theme tune and realised, oh wait, this could actually work. I actually can see how this would function as a proper musical.
So you actually thought the structure was a...
It was when I always kind of when we were pushing the joke a year before that, I did think, let's do it. It's like time travel. Let's go through all the political philosophers. This is how it would. So actually, the Nozick as the villain was kind of the first thing.
One of the first things that happened. The utilitarian barbershop quartet was a very early idea as well.
I mean, we'll talk about some of the conceits that you used to illustrate, but there's a lot to like in this.
But then yes, it was only when I sat down and actually properly tried to get some music on paper that I realised, oh wait, this is how that's how the first scene would work. So if you make the first scene work, that's the trigger for the whole thing.
You've set your framework up.
And so then it was like a month later we started actually writing it, getting things on paper.
Now, when you're gathering your philosophers to pay homage to in whatever way, how did you, as a creative team, work out which ones were in, who's in and who's out in the world of political philosophy?
So I think we thought about the ones who were important for what John Rawls had to say. So John Rawls gave a series of lectures which are posthumously published called, I think, the Lectures on the History of Western Political Philosophy. Or something to that effect.
He's dead.
John Rawls, yes.
All good political philosophers are.
Yes.
It's a bit of extreme of him to go to that extent.
We read, or I say we, Elon read through the whole thing and said, okay, here are the really important guys for John Rawls, which is why some of the medieval philosophers like Thomas Aquinas and Montesquieu sort of dropped out.
I mean, it was also a case of picking out, the most famous ones, the ones that people would recognise.
Yes, name recognition.
So John Rawls claims he didn't get very much from Karl Marx, but we just thought he has to be in there because he's so important, even if only for a short scene.
Also, it brings you into the 20th century, which, of course, in a time travel story set initially in the 20th century, you do have to make your way back somehow. So, yes, also, forgive me, he's a funny character.
Yes,
you may wish to agree with me, as you're currently dressed in your Karl Marx costume.
I am, with a torn suit and a wine-stained shirt.
Oh, it is wine.
It is wine, yes. I wasn't very sure when it was given to me.
Also, I like the fact that you actually have a beard in real life.
Yes.
And of course, you then wear a fake beard over it.
Well, so I'm the only character in the show who gets to showcase any beards. I have 3, one as Plato, a different one as Marx, and then my own beard as a chorus member.
Yes, this beard has yet to develop in its own right.
Yeah.
So you pick the ones you want, but even then you haven't just, because it could still be deathly dull, if you actually then got into this position, a long conversation with any of these characters. You've decided, therefore, to jazz them up a bit. In fairly broad brushed.
Yes.
I think it would be fair to say. So we start with Plato and his ventriloquist doll Socrates in front of an extremely camp sort of Greek chorus in literal terms.
Yes.
So when did you decide on the ventriloquist aspect? Or why? It might be a better question.
That's it's a criticism of the actual of all Plato's texts.
Yeah. So so we only have a few books about Socrates. The main ones being Plato's books, and he writes them as dialogues between Socrates and other people that he's arguing with. And one of the lines of thought on these books is that Socrates didn't really say those things. It's just Plato putting his ideas into Socrates' mouth as a way of him being able to say, it's not really me saying these things, it's him, don't arrest me.
Attributed to,
yes. So we decided to do that. And then...
From a monster thing.
Well, I think for each theme, like, what is the twist? What sort of style? Because you want each philosopher, each scene have a different style. And so what can we extract from either their setting or their philosophy that we can make, or from how they fit into the story, that we can get a good, a different style.
You also need to find a musical style that then goes
with exactly.
Content dictates form.
Yeah.
Yes, exactly.
Sometimes mantra that since the books have come out, we're all using. So they're the first, if you like. Then you have various. I mean, you've got the so-called dance-off between Hobbes and Paine.
Hobbes and Locke.
John Locke. Yes.
John Locke and Thomas.
Thomas Hobbes.
Yes, I'm getting my Tom's muddled. Possibly centrist too. Once again, how did you decide that was?
So I think it was originally that we wanted to include both of them, and they were going to be in separate. Very early on, they're going to be in separate scenes. Then realised they're quite similar. They're kind of covering sort of similar ground.
Possibly in a different direction.
They're in a similar. They're in the same century. We just put them together. Hobbes is writing during the Civil War. So we've already got this you've got some sort of violence going on in the background.
Yes, because they both write extensively about the state of nature, where you have no government and everyone's rioting and everything's running amok. And so we thought that's a good starting point for two gangs.
It's violent in its own right, isn't it? It's a West Side Story, I suppose.
Yes.
We've just added philosophy. And my personal favourite of the groupings, actually that's not fair, one of my favourites of the groupings is the Barbershop Choir. Just because it's so jolly. And you missed the obvious joke about telling Jeremy Bentham not to lose his hair, really. I'd have thought the one fact everyone knows about Jeremy Bentham. It's actually tomorrow then, isn't it?
Actually.
Quick edit.
But they do turn up in their splendid blazers and boats, and of course they sing about the maximising of human happiness as well. And then here's something I've got to ask you about the narrative structure, is that your hero, as he dashes through time, spends quite a lot of his time refuting some of the greats. I mean, he's quite arrogant. He comes and he listens to them all and then tells them why they're wrong. And in fairness, the character Fairness then, in fairness, picks him up on that not being negative and being positive. But he does spend quite a lot of time dissing the greats. So
I think it was supposed to be...
Is that a fair challenge? Or?
It is something that it definitely happens throughout the play, and I think it's supposed to be part of his own development. So in his actual books, as opposed to just the characters' books, he does talk about how he thinks people spend too much time just criticising these old philosophers and not actually making the best of it as they can. He says a lot of these people have got very good ideas, and we just focus in on a couple of the crazy bits and say, look at them, they're mad. And so we have him doing that throughout. And then he meets Kant, and at the very end he says, actually, you know what, guys, you do have some good ideas. And so we have that scene at the end where he goes through each philosopher and sings a verse of their song saying, here's what I like.
He redeems himself and also therefore them through the finale, in a sense. Yeah. I appreciate that.
So he's bringing all of Western political thought together in his book, and
but
this is the
fairly
conclusion.
Arrogant in its own right.
Yes, I mean that's.
Bringing the house down.
There's a point that basically that John Rawls himself was actually a very, very humble man.
Oh, he was,
and incredibly not arrogant at all.
Yeah. So in a very early script, we had him saying, if I write this theory, I'll make money, I'll get tenure, and I'll win the Nobel Prize. And John Rawls' family got in contact with us, and we showed them the script, and they said, we love it, but we don't think this is quite right. He in fact took his name out of Who's Who and didn't do many interviews. He said he's a very humble man. So we changed the script and had him wanting to find out about knowledge rather than the Nobel Prize.
And of course, a lot of that goes into the libertarian character.
Yes, instead, yeah.
It's interesting. I mean, he's painted the villain of the piece is painted. In bold but dark colours, I think that would be fair. But he's got a sense of humour, or there's a sense of humour attached to his character. I mean, even when he's, I think your character there, your actor rather, is bringing a lot to the table. As he experiments with maniacal laughter, it seems to get quite. He's trying 3 or 4 different ways of doing it, and his really remarkably over-the-top mistress. I like the conceit that she's so selfish that when she goes behind the veil of ignorance, that and is forced to stop thinking about selfish conceits. There is nothing else at all.
Yeah.
You may or may not know is straight out of Sondheim, one of the great philosophers, Sondheim. In Follies, there's a character. There's a song from a later version of it called "Ah, But Underneath," and it's about a woman who presents all these images to people, but none of them are actually her. And the very last line in the thing is sometimes when the dressings fall, there's nothing underneath at all. And in a strange way, I was reminded. There you are. It reminded me of Sondheim.
There we go. We'll take that.
Yeah.
We'll take that.
Very specific moment.
Yes.
So there's a world of difference between having an idea for a musical theatre piece and then actually putting it on. Obviously you compose and you help write the story, but do you have a history of writing? Have you done musicals before?
So we've never done a musical before. I've written quite a few plays before, so I know how to kind of go about writing a script. And
you've got structure.
And you've written...
I'd written sketches before. I've done sketch shows and written the occasional funny song. Well, funny, I've tried.
I'm sorry.
And then I had written a pantomime, but that was the longest thing I'd written before. So this was, for me, the first big writing project that I'd done.
Oh, right. Well, it's come off in spades, if you don't mind me saying. I mean, it's been getting good reviews, hasn't it?
Yeah, no,
they've been nice.
Yeah, I mean, the response when we first put it on in Oxford was kind of outstanding. We sold out 2 weeks before the show.
It
was the fastest selling show ever at Oxford University. And we got, because obviously all the nerds came to it, so people. It did get a kind of really, really outstanding response.
And it was completely unexpected as well. I mean, when we started writing the script, we thought, where are we going to put it on? And then one of us suggested the Burton Taylor studio in Oxford, which has a capacity of 50. And I thought we can do that for 2, maybe 3 nights, and we won't quite fill it out. And then we ended up in a theatre that was...
Transferred to the Palladium.
The Oxford equivalent, I guess, which was much bigger. And I guess I just radically underestimated how nerdy people at Oxford are.
But the title, in a way, sells itself.
Yeah.
It's so unusual as a title and promises a great deal of fun as well. But you can see why people have gone for it. I mean, in Edinburgh, this is it started at 12:15 in the afternoon, so it's one of the earlier shows on. And yet you weren't at capacity, but I'd say you're about 2/3 full today.
Yeah.
That's not bad for a 12:15 show that runs to 1 hour and 40 minutes.
Yes.
In some senses, you're doing remarkably well against what might be expected, should we say?
I mean, it's problematic because it's fine as a musical when you have an interval, but when you don't have time for an interval, it actually does become very long.
It's like a feature film.
Yes.
It's which is really it's not very Fringe, because a lot of the new musicals here are written for the Fringe, whereas this very much wasn't.
1 hour. Yeah. But would you do it again? I suppose is my next question then, isn't it? Does this team drunk on its success, think that it's going to be producing something else? Shall I be speaking to you in a year's time when you'll be doing?
I do think we'd all be working together again, or something quite similar. I mean, because I'm going into theatre, I'm producing more things, so
have you now graduated?
Yeah.
Right.
We've all graduated.
Yes, I've graduated as well. So
this is your swan song.
Yes, I think so. This is why it's unlikely that all of us would be writing together again, because one of us is doing a master's in Cambridge, one in London, Ramin's going into theatre, and one of us is still a student at Oxford.
So the real world is coming along and knocking on your doors.
Yeah.
So I think I might try, and I'm looking at writing a couple more musicals over the next year. With a very talented musical director who we wrote the melodies, and then he turned them into proper orchestrations. And
this is for Jonathan Tunick.
And so with him, I think I'm going to continue working with him to develop more things, hopefully in time for the Fringe next year.
So what is your ambition for the future if you're going into theatre? Is it across the board, drama?
I'm producing a lot of...
And a production side, as in creative, rather than you're not performing?
No, I don't. So it's mainly producing things, not just musicals, although that appears to be largely what I'm doing. My next 3 or 4 projects all appear to be musicals. But
I might be talking to you again.
So actually, what I am producing The Producers at the Oxford Playhouse.
Oh, really? Okay.
From October 30th to November 2nd, which has the same musical director, and actually quite a few of our cast members are in that as well. And that's actually I think the biggest budget student production ever.
At Oxford or ever?
I think ever.
Wow. How would you find out that kind of thing?
I think in the as far as I've asked quite a lot of in the UK. As far as I'm aware, there hasn't been purely on production that much expenditure. So that's something.
What's it going on?
So it's the Playhouse is quite.
Hell of a party.
The Playhouse is quite expensive.
Yes.
And it's huge cast, huge number of costumes, huge. So I'm sure I shouldn't be plugging other shows.
Musical theatre isn't just about one show, is it? It's an entire genre, and if you're adding a bit to it, then why not?
So there's that, and I'm also there's another show that I've actually found here called Mrs. Green, which is at it's at the Free Fringe at Roundhouse, just around the corner from here. That was a fantastic show, and they basically didn't have a producer, so I'm going to talk to them, and I'm in discussions about doing a London transfer of that kind of early next year.
Really?
So that's kind of more.
A successful producer will hold you. Being a successful producer will hold you in very good stead because there aren't enough of them out there.
Apparently, I've discovered this.
So let's talk back again about this, the philosophy of justice.
Theory.
The theory of justice. I'm so sorry, I'm getting carried away. There are ways that people can hear it, aren't there? Because there's a recording and a DVD.
Yeah, so you can go to our website, www.atojtm.com.
Or atodgtum, as we like to call it.
Which, in case anyone's saying, what the hell are those letters, that is the acronym for the show.
A Theory of Justice, the musical. And so where you can buy the soundtrack and watch the film online. Or you can buy the DVD.
You can take it home in your hot little
hand. That's actually the DVD of the Oxford production, which is a bit longer, but it's a very well made product. And we're hopefully looking to do the show again in London in December.
Oh right, it might come down to town.
Yeah. So we originally hoping for September, but I think the cast are a bit too tired, so we're probably shifting that to sometime in early December.
There's a long history of the more prestigious shows in Edinburgh, by which I mean discovered prestigious. I don't mean the stuff that's already got history, the stuff that should have future history, coming to London any time from the autumn right up until about April, and then the decks start clearing for previews. But Oh, perhaps we'll see you again then.
Well, fingers crossed.
Yeah.
You must let me know if that's true, and then obviously we'll mention it so that people get an idea. And so you've mentioned the website, you've mentioned how people can see it here, and there's a chance it will come up to London, and your website will be updated with that information as and when it becomes apparent. Well, thank you very much for talking to me. I have to say it was a delight to see the show. It's very odd. I have one final question before we go, though, which is, in a show which spends so much time talking about rationalism, do you think putting a love story in the heart of it was a sensible idea? There's no right or wrong answer to this, but...
Well, it's a
contrast.
It's a classic musical structure, and it needs a love story. And I think we tried to. The love story is also a metaphor.
Yes, I appreciate that. Yeah,
Well, we try and make it rational love as much as we can. It's not just emotion. They decide, they think about it, they realise it works, and then they
do a SWOT analysis.
It's for the intellectual merits that they love each other.
It's for the good of them, even if they don't know it themselves. Yes. Fine. Good. Well, I think you've answered that question of philosophy. Gentlemen, thank you very much indeed.
Thank
It's
you
been
very
lovely
much.
speaking to you, and best of luck for the future.
Thank you very much.
I hope to see you again.
Musical talk. My thanks to Tommy and Ramin there. And remember, if you want to find out more about John Rawls' A Theory of Justice the Musical, ! You can do so by going to www.atojtm.com. And there you can find out details of future performances, should there be any. And the website currently promises some, but you can also buy the soundtrack and indeed a video version of the Oxford University production. Well, now we move on inexorably to the very last show that we're going to be discussing today, under the heading The Female of the Species. And in this case, she really is more deadly than the male, because the show in question is Kander and Ebb's Kiss of the Spider Woman, the musical. And it is important to separate that, because there is a stage play version of Kiss of the Spider Woman, which isn't a musical, which our intrepid fellow reporters Nick Hudson and Tim Saywood went to see a few years ago in the mistaken belief they were seeing the Kander and Ebb musical. That goes to show what a lack of research will do for you. So I can tell you with my hand on my heart, I am the first musical talk presenter to see the musical version of this really quite harrowing story, which of course is based on the book by Manuel Peake and was turned into a play by Terence McNally, and of course a musical by Kander and Ebb. In many ways it's the third one in the trilogy, if you want to look at it that way, following on from Chicago, set in the 20s, and Cabaret, set in the 30s, because this is very clearly set in the 40s, in what can only be described as a totalitarian regime's prison. I think we're expected to believe it's a southern American state, and therefore a fascist one, and therefore follows on from that exploration of lawlessness that Kander and Ebb have occasionally worked through in their successful pieces. It also shares a framing device with those other two musicals. As you know, Chicago tells really a very bleak, cynical story through Vaudeville, and in a way that can be distancing to the story, at least to its emotional heart. Cabaret, slightly differently, tells its story through Weimar Republic-style cabaret performances, but they're much more connectedly worked into the piece, and I think don't act as a disjunct, but actually connect you to the story much more strongly. So what of Kiss of the Spider Woman? Well, its framing device is that one of the main protagonists, Molina, who's a flamboyant homosexual locked up for his lifestyle rather than for any political choices he's made, is a huge fan of the golden age of films, and indeed his release, in his head at least through imagination, is to imagine he's appearing in, or at least reliving, many of the great films of the time, many featuring a fictional woman called Aurora, who is the Spider-Woman. In his dreams, and therefore throughout this musical, she is nothing more than a phantom, if you like. She is a figurative character, and it is said that if she dances with you and kisses you, you will die. Well, that's our connection with femininity in this otherwise really quite harshly male play. Let's hear a little from the enthusiastic and really extremely talented team behind Kiss of the Spider-Woman. Musical talk.
My name is Thomas Chesover. I play Valentine in Kiss of the Spider-Woman.
I'm Ben Whistle and I'm playing Melina as well in Kiss of the Spider-Woman.
Hi, I'm Shafiq Shahjahan. I'm directing the musical.
Hi, I'm Hannah Shields. I choreographed the show.
Hi, I'm Jack Oliver Eyre and I'm playing the Warden in Kiss of the Spider-Woman.
Hi, I'm Josefina Garcia. I'm the producer for the show.
Now, I've just seen Kiss of the Spider Woman with you all in. You're getting towards the end of your run of time, I think, here in Edinburgh, and you had that look of a well-honed machine, if I may say. Everything you may hear... Oh, there was a laughter, but but it looked smooth and perfect. How are you now responding to the characters you're playing, or observing if you're on the other side of the stage, as it were? Now that you're so far in, you're comfortable with them, or are you still finding new things to do, I suppose?
I think it's... We were rehearsing this for quite a long time, like several weeks before we came up as well. So we got kind of to know the characters, and like some of them have quite difficult emotional problems, some have kind of very strange things, strange ways they have to act throughout the musical. And so it was nice to get to know them through the rehearsal. And then I think now that we've come here and been here for a few weeks up in Edinburgh, I think it's... Usually we're kind of quite comfortable with it because that kind of helps to kind of really... be that kind of comfortable with the character when you're up here, to give that kind of like that fluid feel. But I also think that occasionally you do things that's like different from normal. You do things that are a little bit odd, a little bit extraordinary, and that kind of like that does tend to surprise you. But I think it always helps to try something new and exciting.
I was slightly personally worried that I might get to a point where I go on autopilot with a character where I become too comfortable in a way. But actually, the emotions that our characters feel are so intense, and they're in such a kind of horrible environment that there is no way that you can kind of do it in an autopilot way. It has to be ferocious. It has to be very high tensile in a way. I've enjoyed it every night.
And your role, if I may say, is much more villainous.
Thank you.
So
well,
you do it beautifully.
Thank you very much. It often comes a question of actually maintaining that balance, as it were, between something that's more cartoonish a villain and more of a more subtle, menacing villain, and just trying to play around with that, trying to make sure that it stays believable while at the same time staying intense.
Oh, I got intense.
Thank you very much. Thank you.
I mean, there were moments of it being quite... Well, it's a wrought piece, isn't it? It's not a light piece. People think of Kander and Ebb as being a bright, happy piece, but so much.
Really?
Well, yes, I know on the face of it, and yet you have Cabaret and you have Chicago, which is murder, and this, of course, which is about. Well, in a way, it's the third of the set. I mean, if you look at Chicago as being about lawlessness, and you see Cabaret as about political lawlessness, this is the success of political lawlessness because it's in a fascist state. Forgive me, as choreographer and director in particular, bearing in mind this is done through the typical Kander and Ebb framing device of, in this case, movies rather than a cabaret or a vaudeville. That's quite a difficult thing to do, isn't it? The sinisterness, the wrought nature of the emotions, the relationships developing all through this kind of strange fantasy window of movies, both in terms of dance and in terms of direction. I'd just be genuinely interested in how you think that. How did you do it?
I think it was most difficult, especially with a low budget, to portray like the extreme contrast between Molina's visions and his dreams and his fantasies, and then the real harshness of the prison cell, and physically and through the dance, that was very difficult to portray. It's a very tough show.
Yeah, it's definitely very tough. I think the dance in particular adds light to a lot of the darkness, particularly big jazz numbers such as Where You Are, Her Name is Aurora, kind of do add the fun and kind of the musical element that a lot of people actually come for and search for who are interested in musical theatre. I think things like Over the Wall 2, though, however, and some of the numbers which incorporate physical theatre are much more dark and therefore incorporate kind of both sides of the musical and kind of mesh, so it's not too kind of black and white. There are shades of grey.
Yeah,
within
exactly.
that.
And talking about the shades of grey, like even the brightest of dance numbers, like Give Me Love, there's something wrong with them, and that's why Kander and Ebb are amazing. Like those big dance numbers, that there's some sort of weirdness and some sort of eccentricism with his characters, like daydreams, and that's why the musical is perfect.
I mean, there's a great physicality in the piece for every one of you. I mean, several of you on stage nearly all the time. There's dance numbers, it's dark, there's pain, and there's talk about physicality all the way through. There's torture, there is pain. People spend most of their time moaning and groaning either on or off the stage, and yet there is, forgive me, raunch. And that's a difficult balance as well. There's a certain amount of flesh gyrating I couldn't help observe. But that's deliberate, isn't it? That's contrast. So how do you make the contrast work with what it's working rather than against what it's supposed to be doing?
I think the issue with the show is we tried to make it relate to a modern day audience. So I think when it was on in 1993, it was quite fresh. I mean, and all the raunchiness was quite interesting and quite new to an audience. But I think now audiences, with like the film of Chicago, people are very used to that. And we tried to do is we tried to make the raunchiness stem from like dark pain, and we tried to control convey like the pain of sex almost.
So not just Shades of Grey, but 50 Shades.
Definitely.
Well, I think there's a bit at the end of Gimme Love where it transitions into the next scene where the song kind of goes from like these cries of pleasure into these cries of pain. I think that's kind of like almost a really key moment, like just how close they are to each other. Like, so even the physicality and the songs and the movement, everything is all just very closely. One side is kind of very sexual and raunchy, and the other side is just kind of very harsh and painful. And I think it's been done very effectively by both Shaf and Hannah. So.
And the cast.
Yeah, the cast, definitely. I think it's the desire as well, and kind of different lines of desire and kind of branching out as well.
Because this character, like, he's gay and he's been suppressed his whole life, and like clearly he's felt intense emotional and physical pain and this intense desire to emancipate himself and emancipate his sexuality, and that channels through his desire to be physically emancipated from the prison and then to be sexually emancipated with Valentine.
And I think the set adds to that, the very confined space, not only within choreography and kind of dance numbers which have to be confined to a space, but the prison cell itself kind of physically defines the boundaries, not only sexually, on stage but yeah, emotionally as
we were actually quite surprised at how much smaller the stage was from our rehearsal space. I wasn't quite used to the beginning, got quite a shock when suddenly Will fell on my feet in the opening scene. Like, what am I going to do now? I'm meant to step in his face? And they were doing the dress rehearsal. I turned around, nearly fell over him.
Spark, you stepping on his face might be a character.
Might very well be a character. Exactly.
We did tell him, if you do have to step on his face, do it in character, don't hop over him.
I mean, forgive me, I'm going to talk now about the relationships and the characters themselves. You play the governor of this prison, which is in a fascist state where, you know, the disaffected of society are put in different ways, terrorists or people who are deemed to be unlike. It's dislike of the unlike is fascism. So, but you have a piece where you have to talk about your own compassion. Now, obviously it's ironic and sarcastic, but is it possible how do you find within you as a person what it takes to be as lacking in compassion as that?
Oh, it's rather easy for me, I'd say. I'm
I'm
very much a method person, and as far as I'm concerned, I make myself as dark and twisted aside as him. How many times I've thought of killing Tom in horrible ways in my head these past few weeks? Oh, I can't really count.
No actor can say more, as far as I'm concerned. Now, the relationship between the two men is the linchpin of the whole piece in many ways. But you come at it from totally different polarities. You know, you're a revolutionary, and so much of old Marxist revolutionary politics doesn't much take into sexual
no, not at all.
differences, shall we say. And of course Molina is a gay man, and a relatively out gay man, let's face it. And he has found dignity in his circumstance in a strange way. He's not, you're still fighting. You've won your fight at one level by giving in.
Yes.
And those are very different political positions and emotional positions to come from, in which for the two characters to then find a place. Now, obviously, it's in the text, it's in the narrative, but how do you interpret that and bring it to? I mean, I've seen it on stage, but what was the journey for you to find their journey?
Well, personally, when Valentin goes into the prison, he's already torn. He's torn between his revolutionary ideals, and he's torn between that and his girlfriend Marta, and so he's already angry just for having these two big influences, and he also has the pure anger towards the warden, towards the people who've imprisoned him, who he's striving to eradicate from the world, and it makes him furious. And then suddenly he has this man Molina, who he would like to just ignore. He would like to pretend that he's not there, and Molina does not give him a chance. And it comes to a point where Molina actually becomes a third influence in his life. He comes to respect the way that Molina has dealt with prison life. He comes to almost appreciate his visions and his dreams and his fantasies to the extent that that Valentin starts to enjoy them as well. And by the end of it, Valentin has to make the tough choice of which influence he finds most important. And well, he chooses probably the most tragic one.
Yeah, I think the idea Tom spoke about this kind of like these kind of different opposing forces pulling apart. Those were key when we were kind of developing the characters and working with it in a thing, because like Melina as well, like Valentin, has several different factors. He is an openly gay man. He is quite out as well in prison, it seems, but he has this desperate desire for his mother to appreciate him, his mother to accept him for who he is, and those kind of two things war within him. And then suddenly he's also faced with a deep attraction to this new inmate that he's in the cell with, and so there's kind of like all these several kind of things that are pulling apart. And I think it's that kind of that tension that we really been working with, the kind of like the sense of opposing forces being pulled different directions. That's really what I think gives the musical a lot of its flavour, a lot of its depth, I think.
Well, there are polarities all the way through, even down to the fact that your character doesn't stop talking and your character is very silent. And your character has to talk to save his life, and your character has to not talk to save his life. And if you are finding a middle road between those two characters that's going to be successful, then clearly something's going to go horribly wrong. Hence, Spider-Woman.
Exactly. Yes. this thing that Melina has created in his mind, part of one of his movies, that kind of the aspect he's most kind of sums up the things he's really scared of, but also things he's really attracted to. Another polarity there with the Spider-Woman, like she's between Valentin and Melina, but she's also like the two sides of Melina's own mind, like his deep kind of desire of sexual things, but also his fear of death and of being accepted and things like that. So it's quite loads of polarities going on.
And Josephina, you're the producer.
Yes.
So, how did you come to the decision to put on Kiss of the Spider-Woman?
Well, you see, that decision wasn't actually mine. That was Shafiq's decision. I came to the process a bit later than that, so...
We started with this project since like March in 2012. It was like a rainy...
a long gestation period.
Yeah, it was a rainy Tuesday evening. I sat down at my YouTube channel watching Vanessa Williams like sing the song.
That's a perfectly normal evening in many
Of course. Fell in love with the show. I've been working. We put on a workshop in like this October, and then we brought it to the Fringe. And it's just been a really long. I've worked with Hannah Shields. She's like my little sister now, or my big sister. And we collaborate really well together. So it's just been a really long process, and it's a nice way to tie up everything.
And are you a group? I mean, who are you?
We are from UCL University in London, so we are just a student group from there. We all study completely separate things. We're aged 19 to 25, and we're just in a musical theatre society at uni, and we just get together and audition and do shows and have a really great time.
So you're up Holborn way?
Yeah, up on Gower Street.
So you decided that this was the show for you, but how, lifting it off, did you always envisage it coming to Edinburgh in 2013?
No, not at all. I bid for the show first, got rejected, then bid for the show again, got accepted, did the show as a workshop, and then bid for the show for Edinburgh, and got the show here. And it just shows because I love the show. It's really personal to me. It's very special. I think it's so underrated. It is, and the music is just one of the it's a beautiful album, beautiful soundtrack. So why not? And we managed to bring it here, which is a big deal for us.
It's the first time our university's come to Edinburgh, the Musical Theatre Society from our university.
Oh, this is your premiere?
This is our premiere, this is our first time ever, so it's our...
Oh, good.
Yeah, so we're hoping to make it a tradition and come every year, but this was kind of the birth of it.
Groundbreaking.
Yeah.
And not make too much of a loss.
Oh. But creatively, if you don't mind me saying, you've made lots of positive... it's a brilliant positive show, which you've done brilliantly and positively. So were you about to say something as well?
Oh, no, I was just about to say what she was about to say.
Oh, well, you were right to have done so. So, you're coming to the end of your run here. Is it going to go on any further for you as a group, or is this the end of the line and then start again for next time?
I think the show itself, this is probably the end of the line for the show. I don't think we can really do it again next year at uni because we've already done it.
Yeah.
But as a group, I mean, we've got other shows coming up next year at university. Hopefully we're going to come up to Edinburgh again. I'm graduating, but all these lovely people are staying at uni, so they're all going to be involved in future projects.
Yeah. Can we do a cheeky plug?
We're directing and choreographing The Wild Party, like Hughes as The Wild Party.
There's two Wild Parties.
At the Bloomsbury Theatre in December, so that's our next project.
So first week of December.
And where?
The Bloomsbury Theatre in London.
Jolly in London?
Yeah.
Oh, well, do let me know.
Yeah,
we'd like to talk to you again. But what next for you all then individually? I mean, you're going to carry on acting, I assume. We'll start here.
Well, I'm president of the Musical Theatre Society for next year, so I'll be overseeing we do 2 Bloomsbury shows and 2 in a smaller theatre called the Garage Theatre. So I'll probably perform if I'm lucky enough to get into one of them, and then I'm also assistant directing Hair, which will be in the Bloomsbury Theatre in our second term. I'll be doing lots for musical theatre next year.
So I'll certainly see you up here next year then.
Potentially, hopefully, yeah. If we can bring another show up, then I would love to be here.
Yeah, and I'm hopefully next year I'm going to really try and concentrate on putting more of a... I run an improvised musical group at UCL. We put on improvised musicals, and so we've been doing it for a few years, but I really want to really get that going to a better extent next year. I think we want to kind of put a lot more effort into that. So I may be in a few other shows, but I'm going to try and concentrate on my improvised musical instead, which I think will be a lot of fun. Oh yeah, my degree maybe as well. Let's probably do that.
Oh yeah, I do that as well.
Anyone can do that.
Yeah, it's fine. That's all right.
I've told you what we're going to do next. So.
So Wild Party will be the next step, and just putting on.
Well, if a committee allows, we might be putting on a production of Threepenny Opera next year in an alternate venue.
Oh, splendid. So
And I'll be directing that, hopefully.
Oh, Kurt Weiling.
Yes,
Splendid.
one of my favourites.
That's you've got a taste for fascism, if you don't mind.
Oh, thank you. Well, I just like egoism run amok. It's one of my favourite themes. I mean, one thing to do, because we won't have as much money next year as before, but we're going to try and make yeah, exactly. It's going to try and make like a shoestring style. So like by beggars for beggars. Make it like have no budget for costume, like throwing scraps of material together to create like a tuxedo out of pieces of Velcro. So hopefully we can find something creative out of a lack of funding.
Well, beggars operas can't be too.
Yes, exactly.
I've graduated this year, so I will be joining the big bad world of the city and working.
But are you going to be keeping a finger in performance and production?
I wish I could say yes, but I don't know if I'll have time. If I have time, I'll be joining whichever amateur dramatic society will have me, and be singing, and I'll be watching all these guys and supporting them in whatever I can. But I'm not sure.
Well, thank you very much. I thought Kiss the Spider Woman was a fantastic show. I like what you did with it. You got across the emotional journeys for everyone. And forgive me, I would call you a 4-star show. Have you had stars?
We're very happy.
We've had 1 5-star.
Have you really? Well done.
Scots Gay, so that was fun.
But thank you very much.
No, thank you.
Thank you.
Our
Thanks
pleasure.
for coming.
Thank you.
Musical talk. Well, there you are. Kiss of the Spider-Woman. My first time in seeing it, not, I hope, my last time. I gave it 4 stars and described it this way. Brutal emotion and tenderness, beautifully done. Well, that brings us very nearly to the end of this week's episode of Musical Talk, when we've been looking at some more of the shows that you could have seen in Edinburgh. But don't forget, musical theatre continues apace, and just to give you one example, you might be interested, if you're near or can access London, in seeing Jason Robert Brown's Songs for a New World, which is on between the 25th and the 28th of September at the Teatro Technis, which is TheatroTechnis, which is a theatre at 26 Crowndale Road in London, NW1 1TT. And it was produced by the people who put on Tick Tick Boom last year. That's Completely Productions. Well, tune in again next week for another episode of Musical Talk presented by me about the Musical Fringe. But next week it's laughs all the way, because we're going to be looking at 2 shows, including the incredible Snakes! The Musical, one of the great shows from Edinburgh 2013, and one of those shows which is definitely going to be going places. I gave that 5 stars, so I do hope you'll enjoy a fabulous in-depth discussion all about that next week. It's a funny discussion in its own right about a hilarious musical theatre spoof, which works perfectly as musical theatre in its own right. There we are, that's something for next week. But until then, it must be time for me to say goodbye. Well, there we have it. Time seems to be up. Goodbye. This episode of Musical Talk edited and produced by Thos Ribbits. Copyright Musical Talk 2013. Except for the songs where the copyright remains with the creator. And why not go along to our website and listen to previous episodes at www.musicaltalk.co.uk. I'm sure you've all been interviewed 1,000 times, but this is it's done as live, except for the outtakes, obviously.